Welcome back. The Navy's building 6 new tech bridges to increase collaboration and info sharing among industry, academia, naval labs, and other military services. Assistant Secretary James Geurts tells National Defense Magazine the effort will increase speed and improve support for sailors and Marines. He talked about that effort with Navy League Executive Director Mike Stevens.
What have you discovered about your organization that you didn't know prior to going into the COVID situation?
Yeah, I mean, COVID's really interesting, right? It's, we've all been around, in your experience, I'm sure in mine, where you've had natural disasters or an event or something, which tends to be a peak event, and then you deal with the repercussions. I don't think many of us have dealt with these, this long COVID, hits everybody at different times at different severities, but it's hitting everybody. And so it's a really good test of resilience and how dynamic your organization is. And so I think we found out a couple things. I think one thing we found out is what we've been working on for the last couple of years of decentralizing, differentiating the work, digitizing the work, and developing talent was in hindsight very important, because it gave us a really sound foundation to pivot. So we've talked before about pivot speed. Your ability to pivot, I think, is really rests on how sound is your foundation. So I've been actually fairly impressed with how fast we've been able to pivot. The Navy actually has been, at least in the acquisition channels, accelerating through the crisis. So for instance, we're about 37% ahead on contract awards versus this time last year, almost twice what we've done this time 2 years ago. So we put an additional $30 to $35 billion of contracts in motion in the middle of the crisis, which is really, really important. One, it creates stability in an era where not many things are stable, and two, it allows us to free up some bandwidth so we can deal with kind of pop-up things as they occur. So I've been actually very impressed with the organization's response. I don't think many organizations can say they've actually performed better or accelerated in the time of crisis. It's also, I think, retaught us the value of resilience as a core attribute to an organization. And I've talked about plan for the unplanned. We were doing a lot of planning on what we would have to do if we surged for a conflict or some, national security crisis. While that planning wasn't exactly aligned with this crisis, the art of planning for a crisis allowed us, I think, to pivot in a really strong way. And it showed good partnership with our employees at shipyards and in our FRCs and with our industrial partners and with our startups. Each one of those were different problems, so we had to treat them differently. But your Navy moved out very, very quickly, and I think added a lot of stability, which is really important in a crisis like this.
So, Mr. Secretary, speaking of your organization specifically, in order to pivot really fast like that, you can't have the situation happen and then create the culture. The culture has to be there prior to. So what are some of the things that you have done or had done prior to this, along with your team, to ensure that that culture of speed and agility has been put in place?
So I think, if I pointed to one, it was this empowering the workforce by massively decentralizing. Right, so showing a workforce, we trust you. We just trust your decision making. We're going to empower you to make decisions. My decade plus at SOCOM taught me a lot about how to lead in a time of crisis. It also taught me kind of one of those SOCOM, truths. You can't, plan for a crisis when you're in it. Right. And so all of that really helped. What's amazing is this, massive acceleration, massive amounts of empowerment. Since the crisis started in March, I can't think of a single, in fact, there is no single time where I said, no, you guys screwed up, let's go back and do that differently. Which tells me our years of getting sets and reps in learning what it means to be empowered, learning how to communicate effectively, learning intent and where your kind of right and left limits are, and then knowing how to communicate where you're bumping up against that intent with speed and with trust that the leadership isn't going to crush you because you ask a question, kind of thing. All that really plays into it, and it's not unlike what we ask our sailors and Marines to do on the front lines. I think sometimes when you're in the, in acquisition and some of the these supporting elements, you forget that the things that are really important on the battlefield are really important in the back shop as well. And if you treat everything with that same sense of urgency, mission focus, empower people, lead by intent, it's pretty amazing what can occur. Now what I have also impressed on everybody is going back to where we were, as good as that was, is mission failure, right? We were still fragile. We had fragile supply lines. We were, highly tightly coupled, and we didn't, the fact we were able to get 37% more efficiency if you manage it, if you think of it in those terms, in a crisis. I want to capture that efficiency. So where we're really focused now is continuing to get sets and reps in and experiment so that we've got both that performance improvement and more resilience as we go forward. Because I kind of see the situation here kind of like throwing a rock into a pail of water. We've had this first kind of major wave of disruption. That's going to hit the walls of the pail and come back, and then we're going to get, whether it's another COVID wave or it's an unemployment wave or an economic crisis wave, or we're going to have multiple disruptions coming at us. We can't, we should continue to get better at leading through disruption because that's going to be the environment. I don't think there's a new normal. I think the new normal, if there is, it's more of, it's constantly changing. So you've got to have a dynamic organization that can deal with that.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned disruption, Mr. Secretary. How has this situation impacted or disrupted the work that goes on in our rework facilities and ship repair facilities?
It's actually kind of it's an amazing story. I hope somebody will tell someday. We have not shut down any of our shipyards, whether it's public shipyard or private shipyard or private repair yard, through the crisis. So to think that we would have 100,000 plus shipyard workers continuously operating through the crisis is actually a pretty remarkable state of leadership. We've had some delays, we've had some disruption, we've had some loss of productive work hours, which we're going to have to manage our way through. And we're working our way through that. But we never got to the point where we had to completely shut down. And the infection rates have been, relative to the population size, fairly small. I think the key now is how can we regain those lost production hours? So we're looking at a number of different things. You saw we surged 1,600 reservists. We're bringing them in to help on the shipyard. We're looking at a variety of other levers we can pull. And we're working with the fleet to make sure, as we have to make decisions about workflow, we're not, we're impacting the work of least priority and keeping the priority work that the fleet needs to stay on point out there. We haven't slowed down our deployments. We haven't slowed down our presence. You probably saw, 2 carriers in the South China Sea as we speak. So the war fight hasn't slowed down. We just need to, continue to be creative and adaptive on supporting those priority projects.
So, Mr. Secretary, anybody who's been around you knows that you're someone who appreciates speed and agility. And I was wondering if you could share with the audience something that they may not be familiar with, and that's Naval X, and kind of the genesis behind that and what the current state of Naval X is today.
Yeah, so one of the things, that I really liked about the Navy and Marine Corps team was they kept a hold of their technical talent. So we have tremendous organic technical talent in our workforce. We also have tremendous industrial partnership and great partnerships with small businesses and emerging technologies and non-traditional suppliers. The challenge is we're a big Navy, and we've got, everything from seabed to space. So lots of different mission areas, lots of different activities going on. And what was a little concerning to me when I got here was the speed of learning and the risk that we were duplicating effort or not learning from each other or making it hard. If you had a great idea, you wouldn't, if you had a great idea, you wouldn't know how to get to us. If you were, say you wanted to do some innovative technology at Puget Sound, while the physical distance from Puget Sound Naval Yard, shipyard to ONR is maybe 3,000 miles, organizationally, it's, almost infinity. Mm-hmm. And so the idea of Naval X was really give an easy way to get at network speed. So the whole idea on Naval X is really how do we get the power of the network working for us so that anybody who has a question can immediately get to the best person with an answer. Anybody who's got an idea can more quickly get to somebody who would care about an idea. Anybody who's done something of value can share that quickly across our whole network. So we started Naval X really as think of it as the network to tie all of our activity together. And then we grew on that network. You can think of them as nodes or tech bridges. We're our clusters of public, private, government, state, entrepreneurial, business, labs, warfare centers activity. We're now up to 13 of these tech bridges. Think of those as major nodes on the network. Mm-hmm. And so I think that combination of putting the Naval X network in place and then building these tech bridges to give us additional surface area allows us really to speed up our rate of learning, our rate of sharing, and ultimately better enable sailors and Marines, if they have a problem, to get an answer, or if they have an idea, get it to somebody that can help them out.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Mr. Secretary. And for those that are watching, I would encourage you just go in and Google Naval X. There's a lot of good videos, and the website has a lot of terrific information as well.
Yeah, and it's really about, it's about making it whatever it needs to be. So we've had lots of other things tie on to it. We have kind of across the national security infrastructure, entrepreneurs are getting there together. We have junior officer groups that use it. The Marine Corps has used it to create their Center for Adaptive Warfighting. So teach kind of Scrum and Agile mindset into everyday platoon activities. And so it's not just a technology thing. It's not just a acquisition thing. It's a framework to link into. And I know, Mike, you guys have used it. I encourage industry, get involved. It's we're using it for outreach events. We use it for industry day activities. And now that we've got all these locations across the country, many of them aligned in fleet concentration areas or business areas, it's easy for everybody to kind of get networked. Kind of back to your core question, what's allowed us to pivot? That's another great thing that's allowed us to pivot. Now that, we're all doing these things virtually, well, now we can really use the power of that network, because now it's not all about doing an industry day where everybody's packed into one conference room.
Thank you. So, Mr. Secretary, we got about a minute and a half of time, and I thought this would be a good opportunity if you would like to just share with the audience what's on your mind right now. What would you like to share with them as parting words?
So a couple things. I think what's on my mind is moving our organization to where we need to be, not moving back to where we were. And so it's that. What did we learn in COVID? It's been a great proof test. How do we take those lessons learned and then double down and accelerate? What's on my mind is what are the new things of abundance that have opened up to us, like teleworking, right? 6 months ago, if I would have asked the workforce, hey, I want you to get, 37% more output, I'm going to make you 95% telework, and your distance learning is going to go up by 65%. And we'll do that in 3 months, they would have thought I was crazy. So it's really taken this new confidence we have in our ability to pivot, be adaptive, be creative, and double down on that for the sailors and Marines, and really challenge our kind of preconceived notions of what's possible. The same goes with our relationships with industry, with small partners, with academia, everything. This has opened up a large new opportunity for us. Now it's on us, all of us, to work together to exploit that. If we don't, we are going to be in a world of hurt, because I think the world coming up in the next couple of years is going to present lots of challenges. Now's our challenge. Now's our chance to really get after those and get ready.
Up next, an in-depth look at the top concerns for the readiness and well-being of the enlisted force. Our MCPON panel, when NATSEC 2020, presented by Amazon Web Services, continues. I'll be right back.